Hi everybody, welcome to the Week 13 lecture. I hope to keep this one kind of focused and short and sweet. I know I say that a lot and I don't live up to that very often, but we're really just dealing with one issue this week in our reading of Potter and also the pages we had to cover and do, and that's this idea of nationalism. And I've put a definition of the term nationalism in the module just for you to take a look at as you read and think about this. There are multiple ways of looking at it, but long story short, it's this idea of identification or loyalty to a nation, right? Patriotism. And I think that we're probably all very familiar with nationalism today, whether we know it or not. Those of us that are from America, this is a very nationalistic country. Other countries around the world have varying levels of nationalism. It comes and it rises and falls from time to time. But for the last since World War II anyway, I would put America at the top of the list of nationalistic nations. But the big question that we want to be concerned about is, did it exist in 1860? And more importantly, did it exist in the South? And this is a long-running argument among historians since 1860 to this day. Did Southern nationalism exist? In other words, was the South unique as a nation or as a collection of people that identified with a nation, a separate nation from the United States? Spoiler alert, Potter says no, not to the level of secession and war. Of course, every region has its own kind of loyalties and idiosyncrasies, but we have to look at it like this. The entire United States, most people, as I've said, Potter has said, everything we've read and learned should have told you that most people want to keep the nation together. Yes, there are people that believe in secession, but they're in a minority, right? The fire eaters, so to speak. The problem for the South after Lincoln's election is 1860 is that not only are they loyal to the South, just like other people from other regions are loyal to their region, but they're also loyal to the Union. So they're stuck. They're stuck in between a rock and a hard place. Where do their loyalties fall? Are they loyal to a new nation, or are they loyal to just this region that they live in while they still want to be part of the Union? All those questions are floating around. What Potter points out, and I agree with, is that the South is facing a crisis of power and control, right? The South has, without a doubt, controlled at least the presidency for most of the existence of the United States up to this point. Most presidents come from slaveholders up to this point. Not all, but most of them have been. And now here we have Lincoln. Not only is he not a slave owner, he is anti-slavery. Different depending on how you want to identify it. Bottom line is, he is not a supporter of slavery, and whether that is keeping it where it's at, preventing its expansion, whatever. So the South is kind of stuck now, and they have this fear, justifiably so, that they're slipping. Their power in the federal government is slipping away from them. And when that happens, what they fear is the biggest thing that Southerners fear all along, is that the slaves will rise up and overthrow the South, overthrow their masters. And I put the little video in the module this week about Nat Turner. We have to go back a little bit to 1831, but this is the last big slave rebellion still in everybody's mind, and it's very violent, it's very bloody. Turner, while the rebellion is ultimately put down, manages to kill dozens of people, men, women, and children. He spares no one, and the reason why, it's been argued that any white is a potential owner of slaves, so regardless of whether or not they were men, women, or children. But anyway, so that's kind of the mindset of the South. And here Lincoln gets elected, and Southerners' number one priority is to prevent slave revolts. Now they have lost control of the federal government, a tool that might help them prevent slave revolts. So they fear, and probably irrationally, right, that Lincoln is going to inspire slave rebellion. And we know that probably is not going to happen, but the South fears it nonetheless, with Nat Turner still fresh in their mind. And they even think that, well, Lincoln's a moderate, which means he's not an abolitionist. He's not calling for the immediate end to slavery and releasing the slaves to do what they will, but they are afraid of what might happen down the road. It may not be Lincoln. It may be Congress, the next president, the next Supreme Court, whatever it is, that is going to continue to take this power away, and it's this power to protect themselves the South is convincing itself of. The South has, over the decades, continued to kind of become a closed society. They are distrustful of outsiders. They don't necessarily, they're not proponents of public education, for example. And why would they be? They don't want these ideas necessarily, or they're not, I shouldn't say they don't want, but they're not going to really support or encourage these ideas coming from elsewhere, educating not only slaves, but also poorer, non-slave owning whites. The rich, wealthy plantation owners of the South have no interest in educating poor white Southerners. They have become kind of blind. It's kind of a blind system, right, where we ignore the horrors of slavery, and at the same time that we ignore this horrible system, we hold out this carrot on a stick to poor non-slave owning whites that, hey, you can make it, you can be part of this. Yeah, all you have to do is become successful, be a slave owner, and you'll move up the social ladder. And if we allow education, literature to come into the South, come across the border, and educate not only poor whites but even slaves, then people start to get ideas that there are other ways to live. The South, after Lincoln gets elected, they really circle the wagons, I guess is the way I want to put it. And they circle the wagons around ideas of white superiority. It's not Southern nationalism. It is this kind of disbelief that their system, their rural plantation system, is not being credited for what it is. It's identified as being superior, a better way of life, where everybody's happy, right? The plantation owner, of course, is happy. His family's happy. The non-slave owning whites in the community are happy. They even go so far as to say that slaves are happy. And Southerners start to point to the North and say, the problem is not here in the South. The problem is in industry. It's in northern factories. That's where the real horrors exist. That's where the wage slaves exist. And there's nobody there to protect them. We take care of our own here in the South, and you in the North, you're the evil ones that turn your back on those in need. We don't do that. So, as Potter has pointed out, on the eve of the Civil War, it's not Southern nationalism. It's this idea that Southerners feel we have a superior way of life. You're threatening that way of life by possibly inciting resurrection or rebellion. At least that's what they fear. And we have to do something to protect that, right? As Southerners, we have to put all of our resources into defending our way of life, and that is a way of life that's based on white superiority. Sorry, lost my page there. So, again, it's not nationalism, it's fear that Potter argues. And how do they get that? How do they resolve it? They resolve it through states' rights. When they start to lose power in the federal government, they fear that the federal government is going to allow slaves to rise up and overthrow them. They start to say, and it's not a new argument, don't get me wrong, but they really kind of start to put all their eggs in the states' rights basket, right? That, hey, wait just a minute, federal government, you can't do that. we have rights as states. Our rights as states supersede the federal government. That's how it worked in the American Revolution. That's how it's going to work now. And we not only have the right to maintain our society, our system, our culture, our laws, whatever it is, we also have the right to secede. And it's been kicked around for a long time. It's kicked around today. If you pay any attention, 2016, there are still people that talk about secession today. But anyway, the idea of secession is not new in 1860 or 1861. But now it looks more attractive, right? Because this federal government has stepped in and may overthrow the Southern way of life. And the only way that many see to do that is through secession. Now, as I said at the beginning, people love the Union and they also love the South. Well, here's kind of the other side of that coin is those Southerners that believed in keeping the Union together are also proponents of states' rights. And don't get me wrong, of course you can have the Union and have states' rights, maybe not successfully, but it can happen, right? It has happened, does happen to this day. But now they believe that states have that right to secede. That's part of states' rights. So that's the catch-22. Let me back up just a hair. It's not nationalism. You know, there are varying arguments, and that's going to be part of your discussion this week, is what are your thoughts on whether or not the South ever presented itself as a nation? And feel free to disagree with me. Just because I have said that I don't think that Southern nationalism was very strong, please, if you want to disagree, I encourage it. But it's at least weak, or the nationalism that exists is weak, and it's fear. And that takes me kind of into Charles Dew's Apostles of Disunion this week. After the secession commissioners are starting to go out now, we're just a touch ahead in Dew's book than we are in Potter's. He points out that there's this basic Southern fear, right? And it has 4 parts. It is emancipation, humiliation, subjugation, and ruin, right? Emancipation, of course, that's what they fear Lincoln will do, or this new Republican government is going to emancipate the slaves. Once that happens, it will be humiliating for those white slave owners and whites in general, right? And why is it humiliating? To be considered equal with blacks, or to maybe even be somehow subservient to them or whatever. Next would be subjugation, because there's this fear, irrational or not, it's there, that the slaves will overthrow their former masters, and of course that will destroy that perfect Southern society, right? That rural, plantation-based, idyllic society that is in stark contrast to the dirty, dingy, factory, industrial, impersonal, materialistic North that Southerners kind of juxtapose themselves to. So, as I said, we will talk about nationalism in the discussion this week. I do want to hear what your thoughts are on nationalism after reading Potter this week. Again, please feel free to disagree with me, because it's happened before. Don't you worry. And I will talk to you next week. Have a great week.